Thank you for joining this webinar on the 2024-2025 FAFSA. We'll be going through an overview as well as line by line what the 24-25 FAFSA will look like. To start the FAFSA, you will go to studentaid.gov in order to complete the 24-25 FAFSA. The FAFSA became available December 31st. Once you go to studentaid.gov, you will click on Start New Form in order to start the 2024 FAFSA. While the FAFSA became available December 31st, the U.S. Department of Education is planning a slow rollout through the month of January, where they'll have planned maintenance, where they will take the application down. You'll see this on the previous slide of the Start New Form. It will be grayed out when you get to the FAFSA website, and you won't be able to click on there to proceed if it's under planned maintenance. When it's blue, then it'll be available. And even once it's blue, if you click on the button, if there's high volume, you may be placed into a waiting room until the volume decreases to point to where you can then enter in and start the FAFSA process. We've been told is that once you begin the FAFSA, if they do take it down while you're in the FAFSA, you will be able to finish out your session, completing the FAFSA form. But to be aware that there's going to be downtime where the FAFSA will not be available in the beginning of January until they can work out some of the bugs within the system. While the FAFSA just became available December 31st, there'll be planned downtime. They're not planning on processing any FAFSA applications until the beginning of February. Because of that, we have moved most of our West Virginia financial aid deadlines, specifically for the Promise Scholarship and the West Virginia Higher Education Grant, to May 1st. Instead of earlier deadlines, because of the delay not only in the FAFSA become available and the planned downtimes, but also the delay in processing. And so for the Promise Scholarship, you need to complete both the Promise Scholarship and the FAFSA by May 1st, 2024 for 2024-25 award. Same thing with the Higher Education Grant. You need to complete the FAFSA by May 1st in order to be considered for a 24-25 award. To give you an overview of some of the changes to the FAFSA process, the FSA ID is a student's and a parent's account username and password. There'll be a transition, the name of it to an account username password that both the student and the parent will need to create prior to beginning the FAFSA. You'll want to start at least 3 days prior so that there can be a verification process with the Social Security Administration that takes place to verify your information. Once it's been verified, then you'll be able to use your FSA ID or account username password to log in and complete the FAFSA. Some of the terminology they'll go over is contributors. All contributors should have an FSA ID or account username password, where you'll need to give consent for federal tax information or financial information from the IRS to be populated on the FAFSA once it's been submitted by the student and contributors. There is a new process for those without a Social Security number that has been assigned by the Social Security Administration. So if there's a parent that does not have a Social Security number, they can create a username, account, password in order to complete their portion of the FAFSA. The word contributor is used frequently throughout the FAFSA process. This is indicating those that are contributing information to the FAFSA. So the student would be considered a contributor. If the student is married, their spouse would be considered a contributor. The parent that I'll go over later in the presentation would also be considered a contributor if they're, again, contributing information to the FAFSA. The student, as they're filling out their portion, will then invite the contributors to fill out their portion of the FAFSA. There'll be some terminology changes. And so if you've been in this process before, the expected family contribution, the EFC, is now being replaced by the Student Aid Index, or SAI. This is an index number that is used to indicate how much financial need the student has and what types of financial aid the student might qualify for. In the past, once you submitted the FAFSA, you received a Student Aid Report, or SAR. That terminology is being changed to FAFSA Submission Summary, or FSS. And again, those are going to be the results of the FAFSA that the student will receive once they've submitted the FAFSA and it's been processed. The FSA ID was the username password that both the student and the parent would have created in order to sign the FAFSA, as being replaced by studentaid.gov account username password. The FAFSA FTI consent is something that each contributor is going to have to give consent for FTI, which stands for federal tax information, which is going to be information that is provided by the IRS to the FAFSA form. Family size is replacing household size, and whereas household size was looking forward to the year that the student would be in college, family size is looking back at exemptions on the tax return. But if the number in the family has changed since you filed the 2022 FAFSA or 2022 federal tax information, you can update that when you complete the FAFSA to update your family size if it's different from the number of exemptions you put on your 2022 tax return. Once you submit the FAFSA, it will now go to the Federal Process System, or FPS, that is replacing the Central Processing System, or CPS, that used to process the FAFSA form. The very first thing, as I mentioned, you'll need to create the FSA ID or the studentaid.gov account username password. Again, each contributor, both the student and the student's parents, will need that username password in order to complete their portion of the FAFSA. You'll first log into the studentaid.gov and hit complete the FAFSA form for 2024-2025. The first thing you want to do is they'll give you a little preview of some important information that you want to review. Then you'll be able to review your identity information. So this would be the student's name, address, and demographic information, just to review the information that was used when creating the FSA ID or the username and password. You'll also want to provide your state of legal residence and the month and year that you became a resident of that state. And then you'll want to provide consent and approval for the federal tax information from the IRS to populate the FAFSA. Even if you did not file a federal tax return in 2022, you'll still need to provide consent for that tax information to be shared with the U.S. Department of Education. So here's a screenshot of what that screen would look like. They'll give you a summary and some frequently asked questions. Before at the bottom, you will then approve and give your consent for your federal tax information to be shared from the IRS with the U.S. Department of Education. For the student, there's 5 sections. There's the personal circumstances, there's the demographics, section 3 is the financials, section 4, you can list up to 20 colleges, and then section 5 is going to be the student's signature. Section 1 is going to be the personal circumstances, where the student will list their marital status, as well as their personal circumstances. They will indicate their college and career plans, so what year in college they'll be, and then whether they have a bachelor's degree or not before starting the 24-25 academic year. If dependent, what type of parent information that the student will be able to indicate, whether the parents are married or not married, and then some optional demographic information. So on the personal circumstances, the FAFSA will ask if the student is married. It will then go into a list of these different questions of whether the student is active duty, military, or a veteran. If the student has other children that provide more than half support to. If the student since age 13 has either been awarded the court or in foster care or an orphan, if the student has been legally emancipated, or if the student is currently in legal guardianship. If they answer yes to any of these questions, then the student is independent and does not have to list parents' information on the FAFSA. But if they answer none of these apply, then they will be required to put parents' information on the FAFSA. Once you go through this screen, it will then ask if the student is homeless or has other unusual circumstances where they cannot provide parents' information. If they answer yes, then it will go through a separate process. If they answer no, it'll go through a couple other questions, allowing the student to provide more details of whether they can provide parents' information, or whether it's a situation where the parents are refusing to put information on the FAFSA. And so it goes through different scenarios for the student to answer. If the student is unable to provide parents' information because of unusual circumstances, the student will be assigned a provisional independent status, where the colleges will then reach out to the student to verify information to see if the student can qualify as being an independent student. If it's based on the refusal of the parent to complete their section of the FAFSA, then the student could be eligible for an unsubsidized Stafford loan, but that would be all the financial aid the student would be eligible for. If the student doesn't have any unusual circumstances and they're a dependent student, it will then progress on to information about the parents. As I mentioned briefly, if the students or if the parents are just refusing to provide information to the student's FAFSA, then the student would only be eligible for a direct unsubsidized Stafford loan, in which case they could answer yes. But if they can provide parents information, they would answer no, and then move on to the next screen. You'll let the FAFSA indicate whether the parents are married to each other, and that will allow then the student to list one or both parents to invite them to fill out their portion of the FAFSA. When we talk about contributors and the parent, it's the parent that provides the majority of the financial support during the last 12-month period. Who the student lives with is no longer a consideration. Again, it's going to be the parent that provides the majority of the financial support. It's either the biological parent or the adoptive parent. It's not the grandparents, the aunts, or the uncles, or other family members or friends. If the student is under legal guardianship or has foster parents, then they're considered independent and would not list those legal guardians or foster parents on the FAFSA. If that parent is then remarried, it is the parent and step parents information that then is recorded on the FAFSA. Again, it's going to be the parent that provides the majority of the financial support to the student. It doesn't matter whether the student lives with the parent or who claims them on the taxes. It is strictly based on the parent that provides the majority of the financial support to the student during the last 12-month period. Once you determine the parents that will be providing information on the FAFSA, the student would then list one or both parents here on the FAFSA that are providing the majority of financial support. If the parent is single, divorced, and not remarried, you would just list the one parent that provides the majority of financial support. If that parent, again, is married or remarried, both the parent and the step parent would be listed on this page to invite them to fill out their portion of the FAFSA. The student will need to know the parent's first name, last name, date of birth, social security number, and email address in order to send an invitation to the parent to provide their portion of the information on the FAFSA. Once the student has invited the parent or parents to fill out their portion, the student can then move on and answer information regarding their citizenship status, their parents' educational status, the student's high school completion status, whether they will have a high school degree, whether they're homeschooled, will have a homeschool equivalency, or whether they do not have or will have a high school degree or the equivalent thereof before starting college in the fall of 2024. It will also ask if they attended a high school, which high school they attended. They will then ask the student whether they had a parent that was killed in the line of duty. Section 3 is going to be the financials, and again, it's going to be pertaining to the 2022 tax return information. They'll then move into the student's assets, and so the student would be listing their cash, savings, and checking, any investments, or any other type of investments or assets that the student would have that would be just in the student's name. If it's a joint asset or shared account, then it would go to the parents if they are part owner of that asset. As I mentioned, you can list up to 20 colleges to have the information on the FAFSA sent to. You can search by school name. You can search by school code. Each school is designated by a 6-digit code so that the information on the FAFSA can be sent directly to that school. If the school is not listed on the FAFSA, then the school would not have access to that student's FAFSA information. Then the student would just review the information that they answered. They can manage their contributor information. They would sign and complete their portion of the FAFSA. It is not submitted until the other contributors have included all of their information on the FAFSA before it's actually submitted to the U.S. Department of Education. As I mentioned, they can then manage the contributors, and so if they need to go in and resend the invitation to their parents or spouse, they can go in and manage the contributor information by updating the email address. If they mistype the email, they can go in and edit that information and resend it to the contributor. And so for the FAFSA, again, for the student, there's 5 steps that they would complete. Again, once the student has contributed their information and sent the invite to the other contributors, then the other contributors would then, if they don't already, they need to create their studentaid.gov account and complete username and password. Once they have that, they'll be able to log in order to put their information. Contributor reviews their information, signs it. Once the final contributor has added their information, then the FAFSA can be submitted for processing. So here's a copy. So again, the student would send the invitation. The invitation would come to the parent's email. The parent can review the email and then click login and accept the invitation. They would log in with their FSA ID, username, password that they've created. First thing you'll want to do is review all your information. So mailing address and demographic information. Then you'll provide consent and approval for federal tax information to be populated by the IRS on the back end after the FAFSA has been submitted, but before it goes to the U.S. Department of Education for processing. Again, the consent goes over all the different frequently asked questions. If a person declines to give consent for the federal tax information to be released by the IRS, the student is not eligible for any federal financial aid or state financial aid. The parents or contributors have to grant consent. Otherwise, the student is not eligible for any financial aid. So this parent would then go through their current marital status. If the parent is married at the time the FAFSA is being completed, then they need to list the other spouse and invite that other spouse if the student didn't already do that. This parent also needs to confirm state of legal residence as well as the month and year that they became a resident of that state. The parent or contributors would go through the different federal benefits. If they received any within the last 2 years, they'll confirm family size. And so it'll automatically include the student. It'll automatically include the parent or parents if the parents are married. And then if there's other dependents, then you would list those on there if it's different than exemptions that was listed on the 2022 tax return. The parents or contributors would also answer questions if there's any child support that's been received. And then you go into the asset information. So it's cash, savings, and checking. It's net worth of investments. And so investments would be anything that is in a taxable account, anything within IRA, a 401k, any type of retirement account would not be included within investments. You would also not include the net worth of your home, but if you have other real estate or you have other taxable accounts, whether it's mutual funds or CDs or bonds or money markets, you would include the net value of those assets on the FAFSA. If you have a business, in the past, the businesses, it was limited to those with over 100 employees. That limit has been removed. And so anyone with a business would list the net worth of their business. And so that is the net worth minus any debt, or the appraised value of the business minus any debt in order to get the net worth of the business. Farms is limited to investment farm. And so if you have an investment farm, you would list the net value of that investment farm. But not all farms would be listed. 529 plans. So if it's in either the student's name or the parent contributor's name, you would list the portion of the 529 where the student is the beneficiary. And so for parents that have 529 for multiple children, you would not include the value of the other beneficiaries, only this where the portion of the 529 where the student is a beneficiary of that 529 plan. Once you finish that portion, you'll then review the information and then you would sign the FAFSA. It will then go to, if needed, the other contributor. If this is the only contributor or the last contributor, you would then be able to submit the FAFSA for processing at that point. Just for information, again, once the FAFSA is started, there is a 45-day window in which to complete the FAFSA. If the FAFSA, since the last time it was updated, goes 45 days with no update before, and it's not been submitted, it has been deleted, and you have to start over again. And so it's important that all the contributors log in and complete their portion of the FAFSA and get it submitted, because once it's gone 45 days with no updates, it has been deleted and you'd have to start over if it's not been submitted. So again, just make sure that the contributors are checking their email. If you're not getting the email to complete your portion of the FAFSA, make sure the student goes back in and manages that contributor information, make sure the information, the parent's name, date of birth, social security number, and email address was listed correctly, and make sure that, again, you're checking your spam or junk mail in case it's not going into your inbox. So on the parent section, again, you'll be listing, again, this is on the student's portion, where the student would be saying what information about the parents, whether they're married or not to each other. And again, you can then go in and make edits to the invite and manage, again, that contributor information, again, parent's name, date of birth, social security number, and email address. If you find that the information from your 2022 tax return is not representative of what you'll be earning or your financial situation in 2024, there's a process called special circumstances or professional judgment, where you can then submit documentation as well as a form to the financial aid office at the colleges you're looking at. They will review that information. They can make adjustments to the FAFSA based on your special circumstances. If there's been a change in employment status, if you're earning less because you had a one-time income that you're not going to receive, or if you have less overtime, if you've gone through a divorce or separation, or if even number in college is more than one, if you want to reach out to the financial aid office. If you have medical expenses that are not covered by insurance, if it's an exorbitant amount, again, contact the financial aid office, and then they can make adjustments based on your documented special circumstances and possibly allow the student to qualify for additional financial aid. If you have questions regarding the FAFSA process, you can contact the U.S. Department of Education at 1-800-433-3243 or visit their website at studentaid.gov. If you have questions about the financial aid process or West Virginia State Financial Aid, you can contact our office at 1-877-987-7664, or you can visit our website at college4w.com. Thank you very much.